And the very thing that I'm talking about is, do I have to use that? I clear my voice a lot, so I'm worried if I have that mic on, I'm just going to be all the time. So that's why I didn't want it. So the very thing I'm speaking about literally has happened to me this morning. I'm talking about limiting God and putting limitations on your life. And I thought this morning, and I'm going to tell you, it's an embarrassing and funny story at the same time, but it's about how fear and anxiety can just stop you and limit you and keep you paralyzed from doing what you should be doing. And in this situation, you know how jobs, you start a new job and they do an icebreaker exercise. Well, when I went to work at Piedmont, they did an icebreaker exercise, and there were a lot of people there from the ER that were going to be working with me. So they said, I want you to pair up with one person, and I want you to share something interesting about yourself, and then share something that nobody would ever know. And so I have some pretty bad anxiety sometimes, especially in social situations. And so as soon as they said icebreaker, I started sweating. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to say something. What am I gonna say? What am I gonna say? And I froze, and all I could think of is something that you enjoy. Well, they said something that you enjoy doing is something nobody would ever know about you. So I thought, okay, I like to go hiking. I can share that, something that nobody would know about me. And my anxiety was so strong, and I was so anxious that I panicked. And when I sat with the lady that I later ended up working with, I said, okay, so my name's Lauren. I'm going to be working in the ER. I like hiking. And one time I lost my 2 big toenails in an accident hiking. And that was what I told her. And she was like, what? Like, what? You lost your 2 big toenails? And she was like, okay. So then she had to introduce me and tell the whole class that I lost my 2 big toenails. So later, I ended up being really good friends with the girls that I started with. And we were talking, this was actually a couple days later, we were talking while we were eating lunch. And they said, we were just talking about different things. And one of the girls said where she was from. And I said, oh, do you speak Spanish? And she said, no. And I said, oh, well, I grew up in Brazil, and, I speak Portuguese and Spanish fluently. And they all just busted out laughing. And they said, Lauren, they asked you to tell something interesting about yourself. You could have said you grew up in Brazil. You could have told everybody, because they wouldn't know that you spoke another language. You could have told them all that. And you picked toenails, losing your toenails. And so to this day, it's been 6 years now, they still joke with me about it, because it was just, the fear and the anxiety that I had, it just paralyzed me in that moment. And I was like, okay, toenails, hiking, that's all I could think of. But, sometimes our fear and our anxiety can just stop us where we're at and keep us from moving forward. And, fear, when I was going through this, I was thinking about it, because really, I get into a lot about like negative thinking, and most of the time, negative thinking, it comes from fear.
Yes.
You go and you think like, well, I don't want to go work at this place because everybody's gonna be rude to me. Why would you think that? Because sometime in the past you were somewhere and something bad happened and you're hanging on to it.
Exactly.
And you're like, oh man, if I, things are gonna be the same at this other job. And you start to lie to yourself. You start to tell yourself, like, well, if I do that, this is going to happen. I know because it happened before. I know it happened before. And, you can get caught up in that cycle and it can stop you where you're at. And you're sitting there with everything you need to move forward and you're not allowing yourself to because you're just stuck. You get stuck. It paralyzes you and it keeps you from moving forward. So, I was watching this show. This is kind of a series of events because I will say this. Paul asked me to speak, and he said, you have more time right now because you're home this week, and I didn't want to do it. And he said, I need to know by noon today. So at noon, he called me, and I said, well, give me till the end of the night because I wanted to look like I was thinking about it, but I didn't want, I really was planning on doing it. Yeah, no, I'm not doing that. I've never done that before. I'm going to be too anxious. And so in that time in between, a lot of things happened, and God stopped me in my tracks, man. I mean, I had a lot of moments of realization from that point on, and God just showed me some things that I had been holding on to for so long, and it has gotten to a point where it has limited me. And so that same day, I was watching a show called Limitless with Chris Hemsworth, and they give him all these challenges. And I've been waiting for this thing to come on Disney Plus. I saw a little trailer to it, and I've been waiting for like almost a year because it kept saying like later in 2022. And so I would check all the time, and it was on there, and like he's surfing in freezing cold water. And the first episode, he has to walk across this beam on like this super high skyscraper. And it looks terrifying. So in order to prepare him for this big challenge that he had, they gave him all these series of little challenges, and they basically to train him. How is he going to get past those fears, and how is he going to use the tools that they give him to make it through the challenge? So one of the things they did, which is terrifying, they tied his hands and his behind his back and his feet together, and they threw him in a pool.
Oh.
And so what he was supposed to do, it was some special forces training, and it was literally to teach you how to deal with extreme situations. So he's supposed to go to the bottom. He's supposed to kick off because he couldn't swim because his hands and feet were tied. He's supposed to kick off, come up just enough to get a gasp of air, and then go back down, and he's supposed to do it 20 times. So he does it a couple of times. He gets his head up out of the water enough to take a breath, and then you can see him struggling under the water, and you can tell he's like panicking. And the more he tensed up and tightened up and fought back, the less he could get his mouth out of the water to take a breath. And then when he was fighting, the waves in the pool, they started to get more rough. And so when he would come up, you could just see water around his face, and you could tell that he was like making it even harder for himself with the struggle and by panicking. And the whole exercise was to make him panic so that he could then come out of the pool. They could give him tools and the things he needed to go back under and refocus his mind and calm his mind, focus on the task. And then the next time he was able to come out of the water a lot better, and he was able to pass the challenge. So the whole beam thing we'll come back to later, but sometimes, we have these tools that we can use to get through these challenges, whether it's fear, anxiety, negativity. And in my case, and these stories are going to get personal with me, because I got to a place where I was so negative that, it was destroying me, just destroying me on the inside. So that same day, after I watched this show, I was like, that's pretty cool. I'm talking to my friend, I'm texting her, and she said, when do you start your new job? And I said, oh, it's a couple of weeks, but man, I'm already stressing. And she said, why? And I was like, well, I don't know. What if it's bad as the other two jobs? What if it's as stressful? I mean, like, nursing is just so hard. And no matter where I go, I know it's going to be stressful, but what if it's just a horrible work environment? And she said, you work in the ER, you'll be fine. Like, that's the worst case scenario. And I said, yeah, but I don't know. I said, why am I even a nurse? I don't even want to be a nurse anymore. I don't want to work as a nurse. So then, she didn't say anything. She sent me a TikTok video, okay? And sometimes TikToks can be good things. And it's this girl sharing her experience with negative thoughts. And she's saying that negativity became her idol. And so here I am, Negative Nancy, and I'm like, negativity can't be an idol. Like, that's stupid. No. And so I'm listening to it, and as I listened to her, I felt so convicted because I was like, man, that hit me where it hurts. That is me. That is what I've been doing. But she's talking about how anytime something would happen, instead of going to God, instead of praying about it, instead of asking God for something, she would go back to her little negativity spot because she felt comfortable there. And I got to a point where that's where I was. If anything challenging came up, I'm like, give me my negativity blanket because it's comfortable and I feel safe. And if you think worst case scenario, nothing can get worse than that. Because then you're not going to get let down, right? You're just sitting there and you're like, well, go ahead and tell me what I already know. Bad news, come on, you know? So that's literally the spot that I had gotten to. And she shares a story, and I don't have this scripture. I have it on my phone. I didn't put it in that list, Amy. But I'm just going to read it. It's short. Let's see. It's John 6:1. Well, I'm not reading 1 through 14, but let me see. It says, and when Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, he said to Philip, where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? He asked him this to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered, it would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough food for each one to have a bite. So he didn't ask him, how much money is this going to cost? He did not ask him, where are we going to get the money, man? No, he said, how are we going to feed these people? And his anxiety kicks in. He's like, man, there ain't no way. It's going to take half a year's wages to feed these people. And in his mind, he already shut it down. He said, we're not going to feed these people because I know how much that's going to cost, and that ain't happening. And God already knew what he was going to do. And so he already had a plan, and he already knew it was all going to be taken care of. So, sometimes we can do that to ourselves. We can let the anxiety and the fear paralyze us and limit us from what we're supposed to do and limit us from God's word, from his promises in our life. So I started thinking, about everything, and I thought, how did I get to the point where I went from the very thing that I prayed for? Lisa knows. I prayed to be a nurse. I wanted to be a nurse so bad. And she knows what I went through. And I went from the very thing I prayed for was what I was sabotaging in my life. I was like, it's not for me. It's not for me. I don't want to do it. So it doesn't happen overnight. These things build up. And when I was thinking about it, I thought about myself and my little negativity blanket. Cozy and warm because it's just the comfortable place for me because that's where I'm always at. And so I thought, you start off with a blanket. It's lightweight, and then things start to happen and you start creating these coping mechanisms. And in the ER, it was hard. You deal with death all the time, tragedy. And then on top of dealing with these things that they don't give you time to process, you walk into another room and somebody's like, what are you, stupid or something? I asked for a blanket an hour ago and you still didn't bring it. Y'all are so lazy here. And it's just verbal abuse, constant verbal abuse. And you're sitting there thinking, I just went through something terrible. Like, I haven't even had time to grieve what I saw a minute ago, and you're yelling at me. And at first it hurts your feelings, right? It makes you feel bad, and you think, I'm just trying to do the best I can. I know that I work hard. And then you create another coping mechanism, and you're like, you know what? That's not going to bother me. Somebody says something, and you're like, well, thank you. And you take what they said and stick it on your blanket, and you're like, you think you're going to upset me? You know, you can't upset me. My heart is so hard, I don't have feelings anymore. So that's the point where I got. I'm like, go ahead, yell at me, cuss me out, come on. I don't care. I just don't care. And I really didn't care. I was like, whatever. I hang that thing on my little blanket till my blanket got so heavy that I'm just dragging it around like Linus and Charlie Brown. But I can't leave it back there because if something happens, I need it. I need that to keep me safe. And so you get to that point where you let yourself have that hard heart and bitterness and anger, and it's more negative feelings. And the Bible says in Psalms 94:19, it says, when my troubled thoughts were many within me, your consolation cheered my soul. And, you know, if you don't go to God for that consolation, you're just going to sit there with your heavy little blanket on in misery, and it creates more negative feelings, more limits in your life. Proverbs 4:23-24 says, with all vigilance, keep your heart, for from it comes the source of life. Remove from yourself deceitful speech and abolish devious talk from yourself. Because our words have power. And the things that you tell yourself every day, it can affect your life. Absolutely. And you get up in the morning, and you're like, oh, here we go again. It's like, I already know my day is going to be bad. I've said that so many times to Paul. I'm like, I already know. Tomorrow's going to be horrible. Because it's always horrible. You know? I'm like, something's going to happen. Somebody's going to say something to me. I'm going to be in a bad mood. Then I'm going to get a bad assignment. And so I got to a point where, I was just harboring so much anger and just so much negativity that it was starting to affect me. You're not going to have a good day if all you talk about is how bad your days are. And so I got to a point where I was like, man, I really should change my heart. This is not cool. I got to make a difference. And so I get up in the morning and I listen to my praise and worship music, and I would pray. I'd say, this is going to be a good day. I'm not going to let this be a bad day. And I would get there, maybe have a couple good hours, something bad would happen, and boom, shut it down. I'm like, oh man, I knew it. See, I tried. I started off right. Now look at me. Now I'm in a bad mood again because everybody's a jerk, you know? And so I'm thinking like, well, that didn't work, but I kept trying to do it. And then I got to a point where I realized like, it doesn't work. You don't say one prayer and then you go for the rest of your life. You don't, I can't just do that in the morning and say, okay, this is going to magically change my whole day. Everything's great, guys. Nothing bad can happen because I prayed one time this morning and I listened to my favorite praise and worship music. So from this point on, it's impossible. Nothing bad can happen. No, bad things still happen. Things still, people still attack you verbally. And those are the moments when you have a choice. And you can say, shut it down, throw that wall of defense up, grab your negativity blanket, and go sit in the corner. Or you can cry out to God and you can say, God, I need help. Help me through this day. Please console my heart. Give me the guidance that I need to make it through. And 2 minutes later, something else could happen. But it's about what you choose to do with your tools that He has given you. And if you have the tools and you're sitting right there with the negativity blanket, you're like, I'll never get out of this. This is never going to get better. And you're looking right there at what you need to get out of that, and you don't use it, then whose fault is that? You're sitting there staring at everything He's given you, and you're refusing to pick it up because you feel comfort from that little negative spot. So, Philippians 4:6-7, it says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the God of peace that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." So that right there, it literally, it tells you not to be anxious and how, with prayer and supplication. And you know what? Thanksgiving. How many of us have prayer and supplication but no thanksgiving with it? And I was so bitter in the ER that I was like, I hate this job so bad. Like I hate it. So I might be, praying and asking God for guidance, but I'm still real bitter about where I'm at. And really, even though it wasn't the most optimal environment to work in, I can still be thankful that He put me in that place. The way that I became a nurse, He set the whole thing up and orchestrated it. And, it's just the peace that He can give you. It says it surpasses all understanding, and it will guard your heart and guard your mind. How are you guarding your heart if you're just sitting there griping all the time? Or if you're well, I'll give him this. Man, I did get through nursing school, but I don't like it. That's not guarding your heart. And that's really where I was at. So one of the biggest times that I did this was actually in nursing school. And Lisa knows how much I prayed to get in nursing school. And there were so many obstacles. From financial aid, I had to get financial aid. I had already went to school for an art degree. And your financial aid will only cover so many classes and so many credits. So according to what I was seeing, it wasn't going to cover fully nursing school. It would just cover a part of it. And so I was like, we were poor. I mean, we had no way to do that. We shared a car, so that was an obstacle. Like, how am I going to drive there if we're sharing one car? And then we had Olivia. She was like 3 years old at the time, I think. And who's going to watch her? Like, I don't know. I don't know how we're going to. It seemed like there was no way it was going to happen. And so I applied for the program, got into the program, and found out that for that particular program, the financial aid would be extended on. But I got in the program, and man, I was just elated. I was like, I can't believe it. This is awesome. I can't believe, look how God just worked every one of these things out. You could just see His hand in it. So I go through semester 1, get to semester 2, and there's not many tests in nursing school. So if you fail one, you might fail the whole class. I failed one test in a class, and it was by fractions of a point. And I couldn't go back. They kicked me out. They said, you failed that class. And the way that it worked, usually, is that you could start back if you failed a class with the next group behind you. Well, they had just restructured the whole program and changed the setup of what classes you take in which semester. So I couldn't do that. I would have to start all over again. And I went home that day, and I was devastated. And I said, Paul, why? Why is this happening? I said, I feel so stupid because I thought that's what God wanted. And obviously He doesn't, because I just failed, and now I can never go back. It's over. So I sat there, and I didn't even look for an answer. I threw up that wall, grabbed that blanket, wrapped it around me real tight, and I was like, this is it. Everything. I just fail at everything I do. Nothing's ever going to be good. I'm never going to be able to finish school. And I'm just wallowing in my misery, And this is what happened. Or this is who happened. Lisa Bishop. So as I'm sitting there in my little negative spot, thinking everything's over with. And I want to say this because sometimes when you're not listening to God, He will send somebody to make you listen. He will put a situation in your path where even if you don't want to listen and you don't believe it, He's going to make sure you hear it loud and clear. So here comes Lisa, and she said, well, what'd you do? Did you reapply? And I said, no, I can't do that. She was like, why? And I said, well, I just can't, because then financial aid's not going to be there. I'm not going to be able to go back and do this all over again. How am I going to do that? I'm not going to be able to do that. And she said, look, I know that God wants this for you. She said, we prayed for this. And just because you failed this one class does not mean that it's over. And she said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go up to that school. I want you to talk to them, see if you can reapply, and start there. And I said, well, I won't have enough money. I won't be able to get financial aid. She said, I want you to go up there and talk to those people and see if you can reapply, because God will take care of the rest. And so I thought, well, here goes nothing. So I called one of my teachers, and I called her, and the whole time I'm just thinking, yeah, nothing's gonna happen, it's not gonna work out. And I said, can I even reapply? Is that even a possibility? And she said, oh yeah, you can. And this is what she told me. She said, but if you want to reapply, you got to get that application in today by 5 o'clock. Wow. I literally, Lisa got me on the last day that I had. And if I had not made it into that program, all my science classes would have expired, and I would have had to do all those all over again. So I got into the program and found out they were going to extend my financial aid for the whole program. The thing that I was like, oh, that ain't going to happen. Like, they're not doing that. That's not going to happen. And so, here I am today. I'm now a nurse. And that was something I prayed for so long. But, you forget so easily sometimes, like I knew in my heart that's what God wanted. And when it didn't work out that first time, I was like, that's it, never going to happen again. But he knew the plan. When I got into that second group, I was surrounded, all my friends, they were Christians. We all supported each other, helped each other, prayed with each other. I didn't have that in the first group. And it really, really helped me through. And so this verse, I always go to this verse because obviously, as you can hear me say today, I have a problem with this. But Proverbs 3, 5-6, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, all of it. Lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. I mean, like, my own understanding is clearly not that great, because I go from this to all the way to the end. I'm like, no, it's over with. I failed. And sorry, I gotta get some water. Okay. But we do that. We think like, just like Philip did. How are we going to pay for that? How are we going to pay for all that food? That's not going to work. There's no way we can do it. But that's what we do sometimes. We look at what seems impossible, and we say, yeah, logically, and sometimes very logically, like, that's not going to work. The possibility of them not paying financial aid for me to go to school, it was a possibility. But that didn't mean God didn't want that for my life. That didn't mean that even if they did take my financial aid away, he wouldn't have provided it some other way. And that's how we limit God. We limit him when we go in and we were like, no, this ain't going to happen. No, I can already tell this is going to be a disaster, because it's that fear and the negativity that comes from the fear. You don't want to fail. You don't want to deal with those same emotions that you dealt with in the past when something didn't go right. So the comfortable place is just to assume it's not, and it takes a little leap of faith to go out into a scary place where you don't know what's going to happen or how it's going to happen, but you have to trust God when he has promised you this is for your life.
Yes. He makes a promise.
I'm sorry. So, let's see, where is that at? I lost my spot. Oh, this is another verse that I had read that really stood out to me. It's Matthew 8:26, and he said to them, why are you so afraid, O you of little faith? Then he rose and rebuked the winds and sea, and there was a great calm. It was a great calm. Everything was a disaster. It looked like everybody, like, they're about to die. And he asked them, why are you so afraid? Where's your faith at? Like, why are you worried about this? When you've seen over and over again, he's done the things that he said he was going to do. And you know, in your heart, you know this will work out. I know it might not be the way you planned it. And it might be not be exactly what you would want it to be, but end result is gonna happen for you. And so, that fear is just so paralyzing. And that blanket, that little negativity blanket that you wrap up in, it weighs you down to the point where, you feel physical effects from it. If all you're saying is just negative things all day, which was me, you start to feel tired, you start to feel like, oh, I just can't, I don't have the energy to do anything anymore, because you're dragging yourself down. And I mean, that is the point that I got to, where I was just dragging myself down so much that I just didn't want to do anything. And I realized in all this, when I had that attitude, and I said, I don't even want to be a nurse anymore. It's just so stressful, it's so horrible. I am the person that held myself back. I am the person that got me into that situation. God didn't, lead me down the wrong path and say, you're going to be a nurse and you're going to hate it. He wasn't sitting there thinking that. I realized, if I had any other job, if I was a geologist somewhere working in the rocks and digging up rocks and sitting in the dirt, I would have found a way. I would have found a way to bring that down too, because it starts with those little things, those little negative things. And if you choose to hold on to them and let them be your comfort, that's what's going to happen. And before you know it, there's nothing that you're going to enjoy doing if everything about it is something that you're dragging down. So, I lost my spot again. Okay. So really it wasn't about being a nurse specifically, it was about me and my heart. My heart was so hard that I limited myself, I limited God. I wasn't moving forward, and I wasn't moving forward because I didn't let myself move forward. I let that fear and that anxiety and that negativity paralyze me and keep me in one spot because I did not want to feel any negative emotions, ironically. The negative emotions of being let down or being disappointed. So I chose to just have all the negative emotions, and I held myself back that way, and I didn't trust in God. I was like, my understanding, my little negative thoughts, this is going to keep me safe, So the question is, how do we change that? And going back to the Chris Hemsworth story, he goes through all his training, he goes to the skyscraper, he gets up there, and man, I was sweating. I was sweating just looking at it. I'm like, man, that's a long drop. And he gets up there, and he uses the tools that they gave him to lower his heart rate, to lower his stress, and he gets to the end, and you can see his face, like he's smiling, he's so relieved. And he gets there, and he said, oh, man, I couldn't believe, I made it across that beam. And then all of a sudden, I realized I had to walk back. And he said, my heart rate, you could see his heart rate on the little, they had a monitor, and his heart rate shot up to 160 something. And he said, I started feeling vertigo. I felt like I was dizzy, like I was just going to fall. Started breathing faster. And he said, it took me a while before I could get started again. He was like, but he said, if I had not had the tools that you taught me, then I wouldn't have even made it across the first time. I would have said, no, I ain't doing this. And he said, but I used the tools, I slowed my breathing, I refocused, and I was able to make it back. And the thing is, we have those tools. And we can go out on that ledge and stand at the end of that beam, and we can stay there and get paralyzed by fear and say, no, I can't do anything, can't go back. Somebody come pick me up. Somebody come down with a helicopter and rescue me, because I'm not doing it. But the reality is, we have the tools that we need. God tells us. He tells us what to do. And, hold on a second. He tells us, wrong page again. Oh, I lost that page altogether again. Oh, he tells us, don't be anxious, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, With thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. If you're scared, tell him you're scared. Ask him how to fix it. And his peace, the peace of God that surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ. So it tells us what to do, then it tells us what he's going to do for us. It's pretty clear. Don't be anxious. Instead, pray, ask God about it, go to God about it. And then what he will do is give you a peace that passes all understanding. He will guard your hearts and your minds. And it's so easy to not do that, even though it's so simple. But I felt so convicted by, my attitude. And I didn't even realize, I was so far in it, didn't even realize how hard my heart was and how bitter I was. So what do? We use those tools. We don't sit and stare at them. We say, hey, today is going to be different. And you keep going back to it, keep going back to it, keep praying about it, keep asking God. Because the reality is, it doesn't mean that you're never going to get scared again, you're never going to have anxiety again. We all will experience those things in our life, throughout our life, but it's how you choose to go about it. What tools you're going to pull out and you're going to use to get you through these situations. In Psalms 34:4 says, I sought the Lord and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. Because he sought him. He sought the Lord and he heard me and he delivered him from his fears. That's a tool right there. That's the tool that we have. So to wrap it up, the biggest thing is don't let your fears limit you, limit your life, and limit God from your full potential. And when you find yourself in that place of doubt, negativity, fear, anger, you've got to refocus, pick up those tools, and with his guidance, you will complete your challenge. So that's what I have. Okay. Dear Lord, thank you today. Thank you for this day, and thank you for giving me the word that you gave me that spoke in my heart. I pray that you would just let us utilize the tools that you've given us through our life, throughout this week. I pray that you would help remind us that when things get rough, that we need to go to you and trust in you. And I pray that you would just guard our hearts and our minds from negative thoughts and from things that come our way. And I just thank you for all that you've given us. And I pray that we would all have a good rest of our week and that we would utilize these tools for you. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Look, this beautiful woman standing here. I love this girl. She's like my daughter. And she did have a lot of challenges, but I'm thankful who she is today.
Amen.
What's the one they always told you that you had a double portion? Why? What's it? That you have a double portion in the nursing. You don't remember? Shame on you. She has a double anointing, is what I always tell her, because she has the anointing, first of all, with the knowledge that she gained from school, but then she's got the anointing of the Holy Spirit. Oh, man, you know what? So, yes, so she has a double anointing that she carries with her every day, and so you keep doing God's will do, which is amazing. And so I'm not there, I'm so proud of you. I love that girl. I just want to share with you, we have said that Morris passed away early this morning for those who came in late or knew him. I talked with Chuck earlier today, and he said he appreciated us saying this on Facebook as well. Morris had not been talking for a while. He's been sleeping and not able to eat or anything. And so Chuck said he did wake up. He had a chance to talk with them and tell them how much he loved them, and he said bye to them. That's the beautiful picture, guys. If you don't know it, that's a beautiful, beautiful picture. And I'm thankful that God gave him that moment. I don't know right now what the arrangements will be. Chuck is going to let me know. But I do know he may need some help. And for those who are interested in helping, if you would just let us know, I appreciate that. And please keep Chuck and the family in prayers. And so Chuck is devastated, his only father on his phone, and so keep them all in prayer, and I appreciate that, guys. Thank you, and you guys have a blessed day. I need you.